coming out of a marriage in a very vulnerable situation and being befriended by a man who, purported to be there for my best interests and my children. And over the course of a few years, he got to manipulate and control me to the point where I was literally his puppet. And I lost a lot of money through that, lost myself in the process again. I was starting to find myself and lost myself again. Ended up owning a dairy herd and breeding dairy cattle. And there was a point in that time where I woke up one morning and thought, this is not my life. Who am I? I was more lost than I'd ever been.
Yeah.
And at that point, how we grow up with these fairy tales of the Prince Charming comes in on the white horse and saves the girl and they go off and get married and it's a happily ever after,
Yeah.
And I, looking back, I was in this very vulnerable place when this man came into my life, and I kind of thought, well, this is a different life to what I've ever lived as a young girl. I remember the idea of living on a farm was quite a romantic idea. I quite liked that idea. And so I thought, well, who knows? He might be, I guess, innocently, I presume that was the role he was playing. Realized that, no, he was actually like the bad man trapping me in his cage, What came into my mind then was a vision of me in a basket, those baskets that they used to back in the medieval times hang people in, and when they were imprisoned, and it was like I was there and I was just like doing what he wanted. And there was this, I remember one morning waking up and thinking, this has got to change.
So what?
And no one is coming to save me. I need to do it.
Yeah, I love that. And so tell me about that moment, that morning. Like, was it just, you just woke up and you just knew? Was it that the whispers had been getting stronger? Like, what happened in that moment?
So I'd kind of been on a searching journey for a few years. I had at that point done my coach training. And I was a certified coach, and I was coaching on the side of running this dairy herd. And that was where I wanted to go in my life. I had kind of decided, but I was being sidetracked. And I realized in that moment that I actually wasn't living my life. I was living a life that man had determined I should live.
Yeah.
And that was a huge wake-up call. And, it's like one thing that came into my mind was that movie. Do you remember that movie, The Holiday?
Yeah.
And Arthur is his name. And he says to, I can't remember the star's name, but he says, you're not playing the leading lady in your role, in your life. It's like you're playing the best friend.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
So that morning kind of I knew that I couldn't I knew I had to navigate my way out without that man knowing that was what I was doing, or the repercussions of that would be unbearable for me, and I would end up more and more trapped. So it did take me some time. It took a lot of courage and a lot of tenacity and belief in myself. Through that time. And yet I do remember feeling very ashamed of where I'd gotten to in my life. There was feeling like I was an absolute failure. Like I had done all these things wrong. And there was also, I remember feeling like I couldn't share what was going on with anyone because that shame was too big.
Yeah. Yeah. Daphne, I honor you and your journey. And, this is, I think you're sharing something so powerful, that this wake up process, it's truly, it's not like we flip a switch and we've got it all figured out, right? Like we start to wake up, and maybe we have that moment, maybe we have moments over time, and it doesn't mean that just because we woke up that, okay, now everything is different, right? Because we've been living in a certain way, and we've got a certain pattern of showing up for ourselves, showing up in the world. And so it's so common, and, to really find ourselves waking up and then actually repeating the pattern a little bit. And then that shame where we just beat ourselves up for it, when really we're doing the best that we can. And if we don't know any better, right, and we might cognitively know better, but if we don't know actually how to do the better for us, of course we're going to continue to kind of show up in that way.
Yeah. And so then from that moment began the journey of really exploring who I was, how I could navigate my way out of that, finding supporters who I could trust and who, would love me in the process and support me in it.
And really moving past the shame, not letting that shame completely silence you.
And being courageous enough to be vulnerable in it.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with my best friend the other week, actually, and somehow in our conversation we went back to that time, which was around that time was when she and I first met. And she told me the story about how she could see the walls that I had up around me, and it was like I wasn't letting anyone in.
Yeah.
And that, I know I was doing that. I didn't realize it was visible to others. And that for me was a self-protection. If I pretend everything's okay, if I, almost put on a mask when I leave the house so that the world doesn't know what's going on inside of me. And it's really hard to unmask, to let those walls down, to break down those barriers.